always a pleasure to be chatting with you, Giancarlo. I know I've had the great pleasure of getting to know you over the past many months. But for those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in the crowdfunding industry.
Sure. So, first of all, in 2016, I supported two friends of mine that were founding an equity crowdfunding platform in Italy called Crowdfunding. And so it was very exciting for me because in that years, the crowdfunding was starting in Europe and also in Italy, of course. And I was very passionate about that because venture capital in Italy and in Southern Europe was not very developed. So that's why I thought since the very beginning that crowdfunding would be a very interesting mean to raise money for people, for founders of startups, and not only. And so I started to create my own network in the in the startups ecosystem in Italy before 2016. So when the two friends of mine were founding the platform, asked me to support them in launching the first rounds, and we did it. The first one was My Cooking Box. That now operates also in the United States and was my first round originated on crowdfunding, and that went overfunded in a few days in August. And usually in Europe, Southern Europe, August is a month where people is on holiday, don't work, but we went overfunding, and so it was exciting. After that, crowdfunding stayed as a side job for me, side gig for me, because I was working in corporates, in corporate consulting. But I continued to work during weekends and nights to support my friends. In 2019, this platform, Crowdfunding, went public on Italian Stock Exchange. So they raised 3 million, more or less, and asked me, "Do you want to join us full time? Please do it." And so I did. I did it, and I became head of deal flow of the platform since starting from 2019 to 2022. Did also during COVID record years because crowdfunding was a great leverage to raise money from communities, but also from micro angels and angels. But I started to study also the international, so the European market, because Europe in 2020 started to issue the European regulation, because before 2020 there were several regulations, one for each of the 27 countries here in Europe, but the European Commission decided to go for one only regulation. They went public in 2020, but the grace period for all the countries to get aligned to the new regulation were 3 years. So I decided to study the market in order to understand if the Italian one was similar to the other ones in Europe. In 2022, I decided to leave crowdfunding, started Over Ventures as a European crowdfunding studio, so doing what I was doing for crowdfunding, but for all the other startups, for all the other platforms all over Europe, originating deals from one side, and on the other end, try to streamline the processes and the communication for startups and companies that would like to leverage crowdfunding to raise money or to complete rounds with VCs. So I started the collaboration with Crowdcube, Seeders, now Republic Europe, Mama Crowd, and other platforms. At the very beginning as freelance, but I decided to incorporate Over Ventures, and so we act as a leader in this market. It is a small one, but we consolidate collaboration with the most important platforms. We work also. We have an observatory on the market. That's why we got in touch also with you. Thanks also to the activities we did online and offline for this market.
Yeah, so we had the great privilege of meeting through the Global Equity Crowdfunding Association. I know you approached me earlier in the year and kind of like, hey, like Kingscrowd doesn't exist. There is no data player like you in the European market. We'd love to have something like that. Um, and first off, I'd love to hear why you just felt that something like Kingscrowd needs to exist in Europe and what that gap is right now.
Yeah, for sure. In all the markets, the data layer part is very important. Nowadays, business run data driven, in my opinion. I'm an engineer, so probably I'm a bit biased, but without data, all the words, all the sentences are just opinions, no? So that's why, for example, when we try to make benchmark valuation, pre-money evaluation definition for clients, or we try to understand if a campaign can work or not, we should rely on data. But the point is that in Europe, there wasn't a platform like Kingscrowd. There isn't nowadays. And so that's why there are other players that try to put together the data, but the data are very fragmented, not really consistent. And so we struggled a lot. We decided to start create a data set 2 years ago, and so we created this report that is issued one per year and then updated quarterly, but it's our European community capital landscape. But the point is, if you, for example, if you are a founder and would like to start an equity crowdfunding round, or you would like to understand if you can really rely on the community funding, the micro angeling, and so on, you don't have a real time observatory where you can understand how the market is going, where the money are going, and so on, flowing, and so on.
Yeah.
So that's why, and the point is that in Europe, at the moment, there are 27 countries, and so the market is very fragmented. So
Yeah.
having, but you can raise money from Italy to from also from French investors, German investors, English investors. So that's why it is very useful to have an intelligent dashboard where you can understand all the data, jumping in different campaigns in different countries and so on.
Yeah, no, I mean, totally makes sense from our perspective, right? You need that centralized layer to be able to find everything. And as much as we see fragmentation in the US market, thinking about 27 unique countries, it's like that's an unbelievable thing to think about the complexities of in between countries and all of that. Um, in terms of the market, you've told me some interesting stats as we've gotten into this that I thought were really, really cool about the European market. Talk to me about kind of like deal flow, dollars in the market, average amount raised by companies. I'd love to understand just a little bit more perspective on the European market today.
Yeah. So if we look at 2025 data, we have an overall picture of them. Overall, there were raised only through equity crowdfunding, so not considering lending, and of course not considering real estate, more or less more than 300 million euro, that are almost $350, more or less. But for example, in the first 6 months of 2026, there are also that was an increase in this total amount because now we are at almost 200 million, and we are
Hmm.
not considering UK in our
Yeah.
observation. But if we consider UK, the numbers are higher because the UK, it's outside European Union at the moment, but the market in UK is one of the most active because they started they were the pioneer of the European market, and the biggest platforms are based in UK. And there is also a different culture and different view on crowdfunding in UK instead of Europe. But there are other countries like France and Germany that are growing market and that are since a few years the leader in the European market also for venture capital that are growing very fast also in the crowdfunding because platforms are trying to make this mixed round, no? So starting with VCs money, then complete with communities or micro angeling. Or so there are several trends that probably are similar to the United States ones.
Yeah.
So there are very similarities, some similarities with the Europe, US market. Sorry, for example, also looking at the pre-IPO rounds, no, for the secondary and so on. But at the same time, there are also some peculiarities regarding the need of this tool to make the ecosystem grow. Because, for example, in Europe, the money from angels are less than the ones in the United States. So usually the platforms can increase the raises because the offline syndicates are smaller than the ones that you have in US.
Sure. So if we look at EU and the UK in total, how much goes into crowdfunding each year for equity deals?
500 more or less.
500 million. Gotcha.
500
And then
million.
on average, how many dollars are raised like per company?
On average is almost 600,000, 700,000. You have to know
That's
that
amazing.
in total, you can raise through the EU license, EU regulation, up to 5 million. In UK, up to 8 million. So if you are a platform like Crowdcube or like Republic Europe that are own both licenses, you can raise for a company up to 13 million. But usually average rounds are now are growing. The average is growing because there is also an increase. There is also an increase of the quality of the deals, and so the average deal is 700,000.
Wow, that's really
Yes.
good. And so I mean that's more than 4 times like the average amount or median amount we'll see in the United States. 150, 200K is like most of it. Now, then we have the outliers who raise 50 million, 70 million, all of that, but they're actually smaller on average. So, is there just a really good ecosystem of investors? Is the marketing more sophisticated? Is there better distribution? What do you think are some of the drivers that are leading? I mean, that's a very healthy round for a lot of companies.
Yeah, I think that the main driver is that instead of the United States, it's more difficult for someone that like to invest as an angel investor in a company to access deal flow because
In Europe.
in Europe, yes,
Yeah.
in United States, it's probably easier
Yeah.
somehow if you want to invest 50 bucks, so 50 grand, sorry. If you want to invest 50 grand, okay, it's easier to access, and you are in the Valley or in New York. I don't know very well where are the best deals, but I know that if you are in the scene, you can access very easily on these deals. In Europe, cause the fragmentation, cause that there are many closed systems, closed circle. It's not so easy. And so if you want to access to a bigger number of potential angels, it's easier through platforms. That's why, for example, there is also an increase of the usage of platforms as a syndicates tools, and so you can raise private deals on platforms because platforms provide you not only the tech stack and the compliance stack, but also some contacts of their best investors, for example.
Yeah. So, and then in terms of the number of deals each year, what is that about?
Last year was more or less on the total amount, 300 million that was equity for EU without
And then the
UK.
number of companies?
Yeah, number of companies was 400. So because
400.
the average is 700K, so 300 million more or less on 400 total deals.
And is there a certain type of company or industries that do really well in the EU, or is it a pretty wide spectrum? In the US, it's very wide, so I was just curious.
Also EU, but the best sector is the best industry is the health tech. So the life sciences, let's
Hmm.
say that usually it's because on the crowdfunding in Europe, you mirror the venture capital. You see how venture capital and okay, now there are a lot of investments in AI, of course. But life sciences, biotech, medtech, health tech are very, very invested through platforms. That's why, for example, there is also a specific platform that is vertical on life science. They are based in Spain, but they operate all over Europe. They are called Capital Cell. And so that's why, but also in other platforms that are more generalist, they have a lot of campaigns on health tech, med tech. Second, at the second place, food tech. But it's very, wide, wide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that people tell me all the time, and I think it's a little bit of a misnomer, and part of it is maybe true too, but is that in the European market, investors are more conservative. They're less willing to bet on just like an idea. They need to see real traction and revenues, and preferably they're profitable, all these things. In your experience, is that the case, or is there a subset of investors in Europe that are very risk forward and willing to invest in real startups?
I think that it depends because, as we said, of course, the general culture is more conservative than the United States. But on the other hand, UK is different, for example, from Italy and Spain that are more Mediterranean, more conservative. But yes, at the moment, there is a trend that is increasing the number and also the risk that people is taking to invest in startups. But till now, the, the there was a more conservative approach.
And do you have a sense of how many investors on average are investing each year in the EU market?
Last year there was 40,000 investments. We don't know. We don't have at the moment the data of the
Repeat
in single
investor.
investors. But what I can say is that the repeaters are almost the 15% from our study. So I can tell you that if we make this calculation, I think that there can be 30,000 investors,
Yeah,
more or
that
less.
that makes a lot of sense. And is there a certain profile of what they look like in terms of demographics, male, female, wealth levels, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's a work that we have to do in the next weeks in order to understand better who is the typical investor. But looking at some studies they did in the past years, for sure it's mostly a man, 35, 60 years old, with degree, an educational degree, so a bachelor or master degree. And so it's typical a manager or an entrepreneur himself. So that's it.
Nice. And then in terms of, we hit on the market opportunity, the market size, the investors involved. I'd love to understand just from a like more of a color commentary perspective. What are some of the most high profile or most successful companies that have raised in the space?
Yeah, the most famous is Revolut, no? Because it's the biggest unicorn that raised also through more than one crowdfunding round in the past years, and now the valuation is over 40 billions, if I remember well.
I think it's
They,
over
they, they
100 billion now.
over 100, yeah, sorry, over 100 because it changes month by
It's so
month.
fat. I know it's gone from like 25 billion to I think it's approaching 150 for their IPO, which is just insane.
Yeah, yeah, and they raised in the first round in 2015 when they weren't a unicorn yet. So who invested through Crowdcube £2,000 now is on paper at the moment billionaire. Revolut, and there was a wave of fintechs that raised mostly in the north of Europe and in United Kingdom. The other ones are mostly companies that are at seed stage, more or less. They already raised through crowd or through angels, or they already have been backed by VCs, but they would like to raise a new round, and the crowdfunding can be a completion of the Series A, for example, or a new round that involves the community and the network of the founders. There are last year there was a raise of Playtomic, that is a very famous app used all over Europe that is for paddle players. So if you would like to play paddle is a sport that is very popular in Europe now. And so I think that they have more than 5 million users. And so that's why they leverage the crowdfunding. But for example, nothing that raised also on WeFunder, if I remember well, this year they raised also on Crowdcube because they are based in the UK, and so they would like to involve the community. On the other hand, now there was a record for the year. Gringot, the name is. They are based in France. They are fintech too, and they raised 8 million from their community. But there are also several health tech and life science startups that are, for example, TRL 8, TRL 7. So they are not yet on the market, but they would like to raise money because they are developing a very impactful technology, or also renewable energy startups that are working on impact projects. So that is the picture.
If you had a prediction globe, if you could see the future 5, 10 years down the road, let's go with 5 years down the road. What does success look like for the European market, and what does success look like for Kingscrowd Europe?
Okay, to me, the success is to reach the 1 billion, no, total raise per year in 5 years for the total market. 1 billion euro, 1 billion euro. And for Kingscrowd Europe, I think that the target is gonna be to be the data, not only the data layer, but also the discovery layer, not only for people that would like to invest, but also for people that would like to come in Europe as a market. So, for example, I'm an American company. I would like to understand how the market in Europe is going in a specific industry or in a specific vertical. If I touch base with community capital and crowdfunding, I can see that, for example, okay, fintech works very well because there is an interest also not only from VCs but also from the bottom, no, from the small investors. That's why probably fintech it's overcrowded, but at the same time it can be that people in Europe is very pay attention to fintech, no. this is my, yeah, this is my point of view.
Well, I'll tell you that, when you approached me, I felt so reassured. Like you're very thoughtful. You guys know the market as good as anyone does, if not better. You've worked with all of the marketplaces. You come with so much of the exact same experience that we come with, right? That deep expertise and knowledge of this very specific market, and you've gone deep on it, and you believe in it for the long term. And then as I saw you kind of put the plan in place, honestly, you took the heavy lift on all of it. And step by step, you were thinking through everything where I go, okay, this is a trusted operator. This is someone that I know we can work with and is going to represent Kingscrowd really well. Like I have complete confidence putting the Kingscrowd brand into Europe with you all behind it. And you have an amazing team. Alberto's phenomenal too. And the other folks that I've started meeting on your team, Leonard, it's a wonderful team, and I think we're going to have some really, really great minds behind building Kingscrowd Europe into a behemoth, right? And making it the powerhouse that I think we are here in the US for our industry, the exact same thing in Europe. And for me, it's really exciting because we quite literally double our market opportunity overnight and create that global ambition that's been on paper for many years now and makes it real. And here's an opportunity to enter a market where if I've learned one thing between undergrad and business school and then working in consulting and then seeing all these companies try and, move internationally, trying to do it without having expertise and boots on the ground is the biggest mistake you can make because there's so many intricacies and things that you don't know about an international market that are deeply different from the United States. And to go in with truly experienced operators that are fully committed and bought into the market, I think is really, really powerful. And ultimately, I think, for investors and shareholders, this creates significant shareholder value, right? This is expanding our market double overnight and creating an opportunity to continue to grow our data sets, continue to grow our reach, and become that global company we want to be with tremendous operators behind it. So, Giancarlo, I'm extremely excited about the year and years ahead to work with you. I really appreciate your partnership. And I can't thank you enough for approaching us and then providing your expertise and knowledge to help us navigate these new waters.
Thank you, Chris. You are very, very kind. We try to do our best, and at the same time, we think that this partnership can be of value not only for you, but in general for the market and also for us, of course. But I think that yeah, we like each other since the very beginning. I think that there was a feeling and common values, and so that's why I think that join Kingscrowd and try to support you in the creation of this brand and the developing of this brand all over Europe with our expertise. It would be something in our that we can do where we can add value.